Before we start, a couple of things I'd like to amend. I'm sorry, before we start the actual agenda, two things. You may know I have hearing difficulties. I forgot my hearing aids, so if I'm not loud enough or if I'm too loud, please let me know, because I literally don't have the feedback what I would need. So I would appreciate feedback on that. Secondly, we're live and we're also having the meeting archived on YouTube. Now, I find this to be quite helpful. I referred to previous meetings and committee meetings in the past, but one thing I did notice is that when more than one person talks at a time, the sound is not as good as it could be. So, not to be too stuffy, but let's just have one person talk at a time as they're recognized. And one point about that, if, for example, I would ask a question, I would be ceding the floor to whoever is next chosen to respond to my question. And there's no assurance that I'm going to have the floor back to me for a second question. So let's just keep that in mind. So with that said, the meeting's been called to order.
Ron, one other thing that you mentioned, Ron actually talked to me about this decorum issue a little bit, and he also wanted to encourage people to introduce themselves when possible.
Yes.
So that way it's easier for people to track on the video. So, but because I broke decorum when I did that, this is Steve Potter.
Yeah, exactly. Many times on YouTube, I found out there are different voices. I recognize them as different voices, but not whose voice. So, as mentioned, we recognize this stuff. I think it'd be helpful to the people who access the meeting. So the meeting's been called to order. Teresa, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Okay. Joycelyn? Here. John?
Here.
Brent?
Here.
Michelle? Here. Rita? Here. Ron?
Here.
Yummy? Michael?
Here.
Lori?
Here.
Thank you, Lori. Noel? Here. Susan?
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. The first matter is the approval of the agenda. So entertain a motion.
I'd like to make a motion about the agenda. I want to amend removing item number 9, which is the session needed this evening.
Discussion.
Second.
Discussion.
This is a point. We can remove things from the agenda. We can't add things to the agenda given the notice provision.
So if I understand correctly, whatever the topic was that was to be the subject of this is to be deleted or simply not go into discussion.
Right. Yes.
So
Brent, he asked an either or question. So is it?
Well, I don't believe that there's a reason to go into closed session to discuss the topic. I think it's a personnel matter. I think the party who might be the subject of the personnel discussion is the discussion in open session. If I'm in error, the other thing, just as a general, this is Brent Schaldemeyer, sorry. Just as a general, we're not obliged to go into closed session to discuss matters. We can discuss anything in open session, and frankly, my preference always is to discuss things that are in open session where appropriate. And so I don't see a need for having us to go into closed session tonight for whatever we might want to discuss.
any other discussion, comments?
If I might ask a question, this is Phil Gruba. I don't have a copy of the agenda in front of me. Is the item sufficiently detailed in the agenda that it can be brought up?
Phil, this is Steve Potter. I would say under old business personnel committee director's goal report, it does have a voting item next to it, is sufficient. And that is what we, my recollection from the committee, that is what we were going to discuss.
Okay.
There's no objection from the personnel chair. Objection from the chair of personnel committee.
Any other discussion or comments? Okay, hearing on this. All in favor of the resolution as Brent had proposed that we delete section 9 for the state? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And abstaining. Motion's carried.
Okay, now approve the agenda.
Yeah.
As amended.
I move, this Brett Schottenmeyer moves that we approve the agenda as amended.
Second,
I second it.
discussion.
Michael.
Let's call the vote. All in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstaining? It's carried. Now the consent agenda. If we give it a second to look over. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda. Thank you. Second? Second. Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstaining?
I'm going to abstain.
Okay. Motion carries. The next matter of business is the preliminary business regarding awards and recognitions.
I am unaware of any preliminary business, Steve. Teresa, are you aware of any awards and recognitions we need to talk about?
No, there was none reported.
Thank you.
Business unfinished.
Financial.
Oh, financial reports.
Okay.
Please.
Hi, this is Fun Fang. For the month of January, at the end of the month, page one shows tax. The amount of tax revenue we have received at the end of the month, $55.5 million, which is about 90% of budgeted tax revenue. That number is about 5% higher than last year's. The next page, page 2, shows the amount of operating expenditures. For payroll and benefits, we spent about $17.7 million, 53% of the budget. For library materials, we spent about $6.8 million, 56% of the budget. Our other operational accounts, over $5 million, about 47% of the budget. Next page is the debt service fund. Right in the middle, it shows the amount of interest we have received from the Texas and the Bank of Kansas City. There is no interest from Bank of Kansas City now, but we continue to receive interest from Texas. And also the amount of total disbursement we have received is about $80.3 million, leaving a cash balance of $3.4 million within the Texas. Next page is the capital project fund. At the top, the first one is the storage center. We spent close to $94,000 so far. The next one is a reading rocket. We spent about $9,350 so far this year. Next one is the technology project for the year, and we spent close to $300,000 for the data storage. For capital improvement plan, we spent close to $13.1 million. The budget for the year is about $32 million. Next page is the grants and the gifts fund. We have received about $156,000 so far this year, spent about $141,000. Currently, we have about 30 active grants. The last page is the health insurance fund. The amount of contributions from both employer and employees is about $2.15 million. I believe it's right on target to meet the current year's budget. On the expenditure side, the fixed costs and the fees is about $605,800. The medical claims is about close to $1.3 million, which is a little below the budget amount. And at the end of the month, we have little over $2 million cash on hand. And then the fund balance is about $1.7 million. That's my report for the month.
Thank you, Quan. Any questions?
I don't
Yes, Joyce, please.
Juan, thank you for that report. This question is probably more for Steve or for Brian, but the 300,000 for the data storage in the technology budget, is that the upgrade for our storage systems so they won't crash? And
Correct.
is that completed?
I will yield to Brian if he's on the phone, or Brian, if you want to interject anything, but yes, my understanding is the project around updating and upgrading our disk arrays and data storage has all been completed. Brian, I saw your picture. What did you want to add?
Yeah. Steve, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
We completed that back before the first of the year, and that was for our central storage in the data center and also for the disaster recovery site at Smithville. That's all been completed and all done. It's working great. So
Perfect. I'm really glad to hear that.
Yep.
Thank you.
This is Lori Lamunion. May I ask a question? I wanted to know, and maybe this is to you, Brian, about the data storage that we have. So are we paying for like disaster recovery storage? So are we paying both for like the data on site and then storage fees for like some of that? And are those like a long-term, like a 1-year contract, or how long have we negotiated, and what rates are we paying for like a terabyte or whatever?
we actually are, it's not a subscription service, Lori. It's actually hardware that we bought to take care of it ourselves. And so that's all the storage that we need to run all of our servers and store all of our files. And then also to we have a disaster recovery site at Smithville, at the Smithville location, where we also have kind of it's a very small data center, very, very small, but that's where all of our backups are stored and where all of our servers are replicated to, and it's for the storage to house all of that also. So we actually don't have any subscription service to store files or do anything other than our Microsoft 365 stuff. But
okay. So Brian, I have one more question then to add to that. So do we have anything like backed up into the cloud for like if that site in Smithville were be hit by a tornado or something? Do we have any cloud storage, or are we using Azure, any of those type of things that we're doing extra backup, or is this our only disaster recovery?
So we don't use Azure to do backups to, or AWS or any of that type of stuff. We just have the central site where everything runs all the time, where all of our servers run. And then we have the DR site at Smithville. That is where our backups and our offsite server replication is done too. And we've had that for about 7 years now. But we have Azure and we have Microsoft 365 for all of our account replication, all that kind of stuff and we have OneDrive for personal file storage for staff and all of that type of stuff. So, but we don't actually do backups into the cloud or anything as a third level backup. So.
I see. All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no problem.
That was some this is Steve. That's some pretty technical talk, but I'm sure we're glad we had Brian and certainly Lori does really understand this as well. So thank you for those questions.
Yeah, good questions.
Any other questions on finance or directed to Kwan? Let's proceed to old business or unfinished business and committee reports.
I'm going to take the building committee and And just a context is that the building committee met twice within the past month, and we looked at how we responded to Green Valley. And then how we, to Michelle's challenge to us at an earlier point, how do we maintain within the capital budget that we had? In the context of doing that, we then also look at East Independence, which is unbuilt. So I have a motion that comes from the committee. It won't require a second because it comes from the committee. And then once it's on the floor, I might share additional information. So the motion is a recommendation to the full board to change the scope of work package 9 and work package 13 to 12,000 square feet within the existing capital improvement and replacement plan. In addition, the committee wants to communicate to the designers to do what can be done to design the buildings with the idea for future expansion.
That's the motion. I'm sorry.
It needs a second.
Yeah, but that
From committees, so,
Yeah.
It didn't.
so it doesn't need a second.
Okay, well, then I will proceed. So failure of decorum. I'm Brent Schondelmeyer. I'm chair of the building committee and or co-chair. Part of it is this has been a very, very helpful tool and everybody has it in front of them. And if I would encourage you to look at the bottom, there's like 3 projects, Rain Valley, East Independence, and then there's RS, which is Riverside, HJ, which is Harvey Jones Building, which is a little building by the North Independence, and SM, which is Smithville. And anyway, what we have realized is as we've gotten deep into this construction cycle is that, and there are slides here if somebody needs to see them, but you trust us as we look at them all, a pretty steep curve that reflects on escalation and construction costs. In some senses, maybe as steep or steeper than other things that you sort of see that are driving an inflationary cost. And there it is. Thank you. And so you can sort of see the blue area is shows the increase in they're calling it hyper escalation. And so to keep that in mind is that how do you deal with the hyper escalation and still meet your budget? And the response of the committee is that we would take the Green Valley project and reduce it by 2,500 square feet. So that gets you to 12,500 square feet. Understanding is that it's a growing part of our library district, and we don't want to underbuild for a growing part of the library. And as a library patron, you don't want to, because you're at the end of the list, you get shortchanged because we just didn't get around to you sooner. But we've also learned a lot, and we believe that we can more efficiently use the space because what we learned in terms of sort of design. So from a functional standpoint is that we can offer the level and quality of services in a 12,500 square foot building, which earlier in the program, we thought we needed to have 15,000 square feet. So that's one important point. And the second important point, East Independence is the idea that there's a portion of Independence that would be significantly growing. It has some growth. We might have needed a library presence there for some period of time, but we believe that we could downsize that project for the moment from 20,000 square feet down to 12,500 square feet. And so the net effect of the Green Valley reduction of 2,500 and the East Independence from 7,500 is a reduction of 10,000 square feet. And so with that in mind is that we believe that we can kind of get on top, if you would, or get ahead of the construction inflation. And so that's the recommendation of the board. We saw some design modifications, and maybe that's the second slide that's up there or not.
No, next slide should actually have that.
Yeah, and so anyway, so what we are asking, what this recommendation does is directs our architects to work on option B. And they've learned a lot in working with us, and we've learned a lot in working from them. And so earlier on, we probably would have hesitated because we would have said, well, somehow this isn't what we have in mind. But in many ways, the folks in Green Valley who actually are in a rental facility and a strip mall center that has few tenants, maybe other than ourselves, if I'm speaking in error, Steve Potter can correct me. And so we want to be able to proceed with these projects with some dispatch to do that. Related, not a particular topic for tonight or decision tonight, we're looking for a site because we don't have a site for East Independence. One of the sites that we are considering might involve a land swap. And if you look on your capital projects down there is that there is $750,000 in the dashboard for land. And if the land swap is what we would choose to do, is that would free additional money there for that. So good conversation. Thanks to the building committee members who were unanimous in their support of this. It happened to be the finance committee was meeting right after that. So we presented it to the finance committee meeting, but some of you weren't in either one of those meetings, and we want you to have an opportunity to, ask any questions about it, because we're trying to really finish this up. And these are important decisions to allow us to finish up within the budget that we've approved at the outset.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions of Brent?
This is Gordon Cook, and I'm just catching up to speed here, but you mentioned, and I just want to understand, so you still will stay within the 84.5, correct? With these changes?
Yes. And that frankly drove the decision.
Okay.
And that was achieved by the reduction in square footage, most significantly in East Independence.
So the numbers you have on here are the amended numbers?
No, these are the current numbers. If we approve this dashboard would be updated. So if you look at item number 9, Green Valley, that would be reduced to 12,500.
I'm just talking about cost.
I'm not sure what the question is, Gordon.
You have, like for Green Valley, you have 4,977,000. So is that the revised number?
We don't know what the revised number is because we haven't gone out to bid. And when we get the bid comes back and a guaranteed maximum price, it very well could be is that if this gets away from us all, we may have to make other adjustments because we don't have hard cost.
Okay, so these are old numbers.
Yeah, this is the original plan. We realized that the costs were escalating. We're adjusting the square footage for these last 2 remaining projects, hoping that the adjustments and the reduction in square footage will be sufficient to accommodate. So, heaven forbid if we come back harder, because then we have to sort of regroup and say, well, what do we do now? So. And just as a reminder to the board, the value of the project is it's a guaranteed maximum price. So if we get a price of $5 million and it comes in at 5.2, we're not responsible for the 2. And because that's the guarantee that was made to us, and if it comes in at 4.8, we get the benefit of the savings. And through the course of the building program, we've realized some savings because projects and under cost. And then there are they don't like it, but architects talk about value engineering. There was some value engineering that was done in the B, really the middle column design, a little less expensive surfaces, but in some ways is that really, if you went to a other branch that had been remodeled, that would be for the most part indiscernible to the patrons who say, well, why did they get this and we got that? So this is an anticipatory move, mindful of what we understand as real inflation within the construction industry. I want to appreciate the committee because in some senses, it's kind of like other projects. It takes us a couple of conversations to kind of work through it and arrive at what we think is a kind of a sound recommendation. So if Michael or any other committee member has something that they would like to add, would love for them to.
Michael, it's been quite a process, a lot of conversations, a lot of negotiations, a lot of back and forth. And obviously we, over this past 2 years, there's no way to predict what was happening until it happened. And then all of a sudden, we've got a lot of things that are on our plate that are different, especially in the construction costs and building costs and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just, so it's an ongoing conversation.
Thank you, Michael. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, I believe we can call the vote. All in favor of resolution as presented by Brent, please signify by stating aye.
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 Any opposed? Abstaining. Carries.
Mr. President, I think the other two, this is Brent Schonmeyer, the other 2 items are really staff presentations and they should go rather expeditiously.
Thank you.
Yeah, Steve, I'm happy to move forward on this. So everybody's got a copy of the committee dashboard, and we've already referred to that a couple of times. But let's move forward to the next slide, please. And so this is our traditional report that we give every month. What we did last month being December at this point. So we had the Parkville rededication, Grandview rededication, Eastleigh Summit rededication, and which that was fun to get all three of those sort of up and going and getting the public there and having them see their new buildings. And then December 20th, right before Christmas, we had the substantial completion of the Woodneath Auditorium project. So if we go to the next slide, please. What we're doing this month, which this month is actually last month at this point, the Woodneath Auditorium Certificate of Occupancy was granted in January. So if we go to the next slide, what's going on technically now this month, tomorrow, is the completion of the demolition of North Oak. So actually, I just got a picture from Jake. North Oak, the roof is off of North Oak, and they've already started some preliminary demolition, but the walls come down tomorrow at 8 a.m. is my understanding. So if you want to go out there and take a look at those walls coming down, you can certainly do so. In terms of a couple things, just no need to go back, Cody, but I'm going to refer to going back. When we look at the Woodneath Auditorium, although substantially complete and all of that, we are having some supply chain issues with some of the technology that's associated with, the AV computers, things like that. So the space is ready. It's just not really fully reinforced yet and ready for us to have people use microphones and presentations. So that's kind of where we're setting with the Woodneath Auditorium. If we go to the next slide. It says we have other. Do we have a JE done? Yeah, there we go. I thought we had these pictures. Okay, so this is Green Hills. And as you can see with Green Hills, actually, there still is quite a lot of work that's being done with Green Hills in terms of getting a lot done, particularly on the inside. Most of the curtain walls up and the storefronts up, which is allowing them to do the sheetrock work and a lot of inside work, as you can see. So moving along very nicely at Green Hills. If we go to the next slide. This is Lee Summit Branch. And similar sort of situation with Lee Summit. Lee Summit is sealed up, and because it's sealed up, we're able to do a lot of interior work because the exterior work is not very welcoming right now. So moving right along, Jake keeps peppering me with messages, so I know he's listening. In terms of both of these projects, I think we're talking midsummer would probably be the open date for Green Hills, and probably late spring, early summer will be Lee Summit, would be my guess. And if I'm wrong on either one of those, Jake is going to send me a message. He says late spring for Lee Summit. So yeah. So if we go to the next slide, I think there may be one more. Nope, that was it. So that is a staff report and update on our building projects.
Thank you. Any more on the building committee?
I hope not.
Okay. So, finance and audits.
I'm up.
Yep.
Gordon Cook. Some of you know me. I'm back.
Welcome back.
It's been a nice break. Just so you know, kind of when things started, we had a meeting last week, and I was appointed a few days prior to that meeting, so I was coming up to speed rather quickly through Steve and Ron. So I'll talk a little bit about what happened to the meeting. The first item we talked about was the auditor and the merger. As I scanned the minutes, you're already aware of that. Michael Keenan joined the call, talked about it, in terms of the staffing and the audit timing, which there really is no change. I think the essence of the message was there's a new hood ornament, but beyond that, don't expect a lot of changes. We asked about the professional liability, how that's handled, and he mentioned that there will be liability tail coverage they purchase, even though the old firm will probably cease to exist, but that's pretty standard practice in the professional world. And I learned today we have a 3-year contract with them that we're in the 3rd year, correct? So this is the third of 3 years under that contract, and the engagement letter will be submitted sometime in March for board approval. Okay. We then discussed the matter of the Missouri statute 182-645, which deals with the responsibilities of the treasurer of the board and the president in regard to disbursement activity. That statute is fairly specific. The library does not follow that to the letter, does not. There were discussions in the past. We talked about a committee meeting. Some of the comments pertain to what the intent of the statute was, what the role of the auditor was, budgets, board meetings, etc. And I did not have my thoughts together at the time. But the historical feeling was that we're complying with that. The concern about the auditor oversight, I just want to mention, the auditor does not play a role in that oversight in terms of approvals. The auditor's role is to opine on the financial statements, and that's really about all they do. They'll give an internal control report, but it's an absence of what they call material weaknesses. So the audit is not an oversight function. That responsibility falls on the officers, the board, and the management of the library. And if you looked at the wording of the engagement letter as well as the report that's furnished, you will see scattered throughout words like management is responsible for this, management is responsible. The auditor's focus is on presentation of the financial statements in all material respects taken as a whole. So I just want to make sure we understand that role. We left it to where I said the finance committee will take this up separately and look at it again in the subsequent meeting and come back with recommendations after that matter is reviewed. The next item was the budget, and just as a reminder, since we're coming into that, the budget calendar is I think the same as it has been, which is it starts here next month. Goes through the committees. The preliminary budget is presented in May. The final budget would be set to be approved in June. That also is according to statute. So we expect to operate on the same timeline. The committee's input in regard to that was for the other committees to be in their meetings coming up is to be discussing the budget, what's going to change, what's new. I would add a comment at this point, which I didn't say at the meeting again, but to look at the budget from the standpoint of what I call baseline spending, what it takes to run things as they currently exist, what might be new, your cost structures that are changing as a result of technology, the user habits and patterns, what you've learned in the pandemic. Do people just pull things down from the internet now, et cetera, and look at what I'll call cost buckets and get those into cost buckets so you can evaluate them in terms of what the funding is for that department and those initiatives. And obviously that takes into consideration whether you have new employees or changes in responsibilities for employees as well. There were no public comments. Brent mentioned he gave an update on the building committee, which I'm not going to repeat. And then the committee went into a closed session on a matter that will be taken up at a later time. That was it.
Thank you. Any questions regarding finance? I do want to pick up that there was some matter that was in closed session that will be picked up again, and in my opinion, was of some consequence, but that's again to be picked up later on. Okay, personnel.
Okay, personnel committee. The Personnel Committee met on February 9th here in the boardroom at headquarters. There was a discussion on 2 items and 1 vote was taken in closed session. But we're not going to have that in closed session. Preliminary, during the approval of the minutes, there was a discussion concerning professional titles and how they should be universally applied regardless of gender. The committee agreed, staff committed specifically to refer to Dr. Pandolfi as such in all future minutes and to improve in such recording. In addition, a vote was taken. Okay. In addition, a vote was taken to amend the minutes to strike a considerable amount of the record concerning the content of diversity, equity, and inclusion audit report. Staff indicated that there had been direction in the past that the minutes were too long and sparse and would work to find the right balance. However, staff would need input from the board to get a feel for that balance. After considerable discussion, the minutes were amended to remove this section. That's what happened in the preliminary section. Second part was 2021 goal attainment. As part of the performance management process, Mr. Potter reviewed the 2021 goals as adopted by the board and discussed the progress made through the deadline of December 31st, 2021. I should probably preface that a little bit. The director's goals follows the annual calendar so that it follows the budget, the year budget, and makes it easier for recording statistics and outcomes and things. But so that cycle ended on December 31st, even though our fiscal calendar starts in July and ends in June. In addition to narrative summary, there were several supporting documents and reports illustrating the process. They're all in board docs that we can go over in a little bit. By Mr. Potter's calculations, he and senior leadership team gave 13 of 15 action steps, or 86% of the goals. Some suggested that the 2 action steps not achieved may have been unachievable, given external situations like COVID, the inability to meet, the inability to do certain things due to everything that's been going on. A suggestion was made that Mr. Potter may want to have a more formal check-in with the committee concerning goal attainment status, negotiation, and things. Should I pause there for questions or, yeah. Nothing? Okay. The other one was staff recommendation for 2022 goals. Mr. Potter discussed the history of performance management and the migration from the step and grade system that MCPL had prior to 2006. You understand that people received.
Sorry, guys. You mentioned the vote we had about the accepting.
I'm getting to that. This is a report from the meeting.
I thought you were going on to 2022. So.
I'm reporting out what happened in the meeting. We'll go to the personnel.
I thought you may have missed that, but okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Name my place.
Sorry.
I'll start again, Justin. Mr. Potter discussed the history of performance management and the migration from the step and grade system the MCPL had prior to 2006. Step and grade was basically as long as you were employed, every year you got a certain percentage. What we had looked at in the past was ways to do more with less better paid employees. And so we moved to a more incentive system, and that has been slowly migrating down through all our ranks. And now all of our employees are in that system, and it has worked very well. There was let's see. Mr. Potter indicated that he was recommending a slightly different structure for goals that were a bit more task-oriented and corresponding to measurements for success. There was a discussion from the committee concerning the goals as presented, questions about the pay for performance in general, and whether the proposed goals should be considered individually, and questions about board input on the goals. After discussion, a calendar was proposed to set the 2022 goals. The board will look at the recommendations, the recommended goals individually. All members may submit any recommendations to the personnel chair, board secretary, and Mr. Potter no later than February 22nd. And I'm going to give Mr. Potter a chance to go through those. And the input will be shared with personnel committee members no later than March 1st. The personnel committee will negotiate a new set of directors' goals no later than March 9th. And then we will bring the proposed goals back to the full board for consideration in March. One reason for the calendar is we're already coming up to almost 3 months into the new year, the third month, so we need time to allow staff to complete the goals. So there was, on the closed session, there was a vote taken to make a recommendation to the full board in closed session. That discussion and similar vote would have been recommended for closed session later in this meeting, but we removed that closed session and we can, under the agreement that we will handle that in regular session. As we go back to the first item, well, first of all, let Mr. Potter have any input he has in this discussion on the personnel director's goals report that we talked about in the personnel committee. Presenting it to the full board.
Yeah, thank you. It's Steve. And I just wanted to, I feel like that was a good review of the personnel committee. In terms of the 2021 goals, which I feel like it was a challenge. It was a challenge this year because a lot of things we had presumed when we were starting at the beginning of 2021 that things would be much different than they wound up being in the fourth quarter of 2021, which really did waylay us on some of the goals. Specifically, there were two. One of them in our first goal, which was Mid-Continent Public Library management team will implement and foster an organization-wide effort to foster healthy communication and continuous learning among all staff. That was the goal. We feel like we got 3 of the 4 action steps, but one of them, MCPL management team will adopt these techniques throughout their areas. It just wasn't possible because we weren't able to get together in buildings and do the type of coaching and things like that we were needing to do. Between that, pandemic requirements in some cases, and also heavy turnover that's been coming on. We've been susceptible to the Great Resignation, as it's been called, and sometimes we're just having difficulty getting people into spots, let alone getting them trained. So that made that goal particularly difficult to meet. The other goal that we had problems meeting is that it's goal 4, evaluate the strategic plan, priorities, and progress. The middle goal, develop a plan to conduct 2 to 4 community needs assessments once public health situation made it possible. Public health situation never made it possible for us to do this. And so we weren't able to do that, but what we did instead is we went down to the next action step, which was develop a structure for community needs assessments at the branch and community level. We actually sped that process up with the idea of being now what we're going to be doing is talking to communities at the branch level and then rolling up those decisions as opposed to looking at things at a regional level and rolling them down. And so we actually made a lot more progress on that third action step than we had anticipated, but we were unable to meet the second action step. So again, that made in terms of each action step equaling 1 point. And you could argue that some action steps may have been weighted, but I didn't do it that way. I keep saying it's because my team, the senior leadership team, works on this together as group goals. And the senior leadership team did achieve 13 of the 15, or 86.6% of the action steps. So that's where we are with the current goals. In terms of the calendar that Joycelyn talked about in terms of 2022, very comfortable with that. What that will do is hopefully if you all have input, get those to Joycelyn, get those to Teresa, get them to me so that we can discuss them at the upcoming personnel committee meeting. And then this time next month, we can bring the proposed goals. I did want to thank Noel. Noel made a really good recommendation in the committee about checking in with the committee and doing updates. You're right. I tend to drop the ball on that. And so if I can check in on the committee and say, here's where I am, and maybe this is where I need to renegotiate, that can be a really good opportunity for growth. So thank you for that recommendation.
Since we're, well, first of all, did you have any questions for Steve on the goals? Yes, Rita.
You mentioned the Great Resignation. What was that in reference to?
It's what some people, media outlets and several other folks are talking about, the fact that many people are resigning, not returning to work, or returning to work in lesser capacities. We're seeing it in many cases where it's just difficult, not just at the library. I mean, in businesses, banks, restaurants, healthcare, people are resigning, and we're not finding as many people to hire on as you would expect. This is a talking point. It's a dated talking point, but a few months ago, our HR department told me that we had hired 100 people, that we had 100 people starting on the start date, but our headcount only went up by 25. And this is sort of an indicator of kind of the churn that's going on in our organization. So we're continuing to work on this, get people hired in, but in some cases, we're losing them to higher paid jobs elsewhere. In some cases, we're losing people because they want to stay at home after they've worked here for a while. It's a lot of different things, but we're continuing to work on that. So that's the Great Resignation.
Okay, what is the economic impact on the library?
How do you mean? Sorry.
If they are people who have higher paid jobs leaving and people with less experience coming in, how does that impact us economically?
I don't know that it's affecting us economically. It is creating challenges in terms that our HR staff is spending a lot of time recruiting, helping with interviewing, that we're doing a lot of that filling of slots as opposed to training people up for that next level of work. In terms of as you might remember from the statistics last month, our satisfaction numbers are still very high. So in terms of our customer reflection, I think our customer reflection is positive. So
the customers would not necessarily know though that you're losing staff.
Yeah, they would, because if we were losing staff in a way that we weren't able to perform the job, they would know, because we wouldn't be getting books on the shelf, we wouldn't be able to answer questions. You call the library and the phone would ring and ring and ring. I mean, theoretically, I mean, there could be satisfaction metrics associated with people being unsatisfied because there aren't enough people. Sometimes you see this in restaurants right now. If you go to a restaurant, I mean, the wait times are a lot longer. You look around and there's half the tables are empty, and it's because there aren't enough wait staff. I mean, we would see a similar sort of output potentially. But we're committed to working on this as hard as we can. It's in some cases losing people back, but it's non-unique. I mean, we're finding this is true in every library and every industry.
Michael, I just want to kind of echo what you're saying. In my travels around the city, and I go all over the city and engage with different people in different venues and operations, and restaurants are key there. People are crying for help. They can't get people, even, like places like Home Depot, Lowe's, everybody is having the same kind of trouble trying to find people because, there's a number of reasons. We don't need to go into all those. There's a multitude of all that kind of stuff. It's very difficult to find anybody that really wants to work right now and serve. You know, that whole area of servant heart, and not that you don't want to make good money and have a career, but that, you know, life has changed drastically from what it once was to what it is now. And I don't even know where the end of the road is on that, but it's going to be a difficult process going forward. And so commend you, Steve, and staff and all that, just, you know, and personnel department, it's difficult. This is not an easy environment, so be courageous.
Any more comments on the 2021?
So, if I could, I think what the intent is and what I'm comfortable with is using this opportunity to carry out the conversation that was had in closed session, which there was a conversation in closed session talking about goal attainment and how that would, and then after that conversation, there was actually a report out that's a matter of open record that the personnel committee recommended a 100%. But I'm comfortable with having that conversation with the full board in open session right now, given the fact that the results of the closed session are already a matter of open record. So.
I'm summarizing the thought of the committee around that was that the two goals that weren't attained were not unattained because of efforts of the staff, was because they were not attainable due to COVID, due to many other things like the shutdowns, whatever. Secondly, that staff should not be penalized for operating above capacity in hard times. So the committee felt that awarding the 100% attainment, taking out those two goals, and commending staff for how they have managed through this unique situation of these past few years. Does that sum up the sentence? So, since committee actions are a recommendation to the board, board actions are the actions that count. We're bringing it to the full board to see if you would like to endorse that or come up with something else. Any comments?
So if I may, can I clarify that I think this is what we need to do for rules of order, that there was a recommendation from the full committee to
Make the motion.
To recognize 100% goal achievement as a motion from the personnel committee for the director's goal attainment.
Thank you, Steve. Yes, there was a motion from the committee to recommend 100% goal achievement for the directors.
And as a recommendation from the committee, no second is required. And so now we would just need discussion and a vote.
Yeah, and this is Ron, and that 100% translates to a percent in adjustment in the CEO's compensation.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Is this an adjustment in base or is this a bonus? How do you translate? Pardon me?
We don't see, this is what, we don't do bonuses in the state of Missouri. We cannot do bonuses. Well, that is why we do performance goals and we pay for performance, and that's.
I just wanted the translation into dollars. That's all. Thank you.
So it is 4% based on the base. 4% incentive pay based on the base. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Any questions on the director's goals or anything else on the personnel report? One question or a comment that I had is that I think you mentioned that there's an amendment to the minutes. Okay. It's my recollection and it was confirmed when I watched it on YouTube that what we had were proposed minutes that were discussed, and the proposed minutes were changed, and then they were adopted. But adopted minutes were not retroactive.
Mr. President, I think that's a different topic. We have a motion. We have a motion in front of us, and if we can vote on that motion, then we can come back to the other. You know,
I'm sorry, what?
there's a motion on the floor, and I would like to vote on the motion that's on the floor.
Absolutely, sure.
And then if we want to pick up the other topic, then we can come back and pick up the other topic. So.
All in favor of the motion presented by Joyce, please signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstaining?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Brad. So I think there's a bit of clarification. I think what was stated was that there was an amendment to, I think what we had was a development of the minutes as opposed to having minutes and then going back and retroactively amending them. We had proposed minutes, then there was discussion to make adjustments to them. And then after the adjustments, we voted on the final version. Okay, is that your understanding or?
I would defer to our legal.
Phil, did you have a chance to see the YouTube or anything or?
No, and I can't comment on this. I haven't seen the minutes, I haven't read them, and I didn't see the YouTube. I don't know the discussion that.
Okay, then maybe that's something.
I have been told about some of it, but I have not seen any of it.
Okay.
So I don't understand your point though, Ron.
Okay, we as a board cannot go back and say we didn't, please, correct me if I'm going off, but we as a board cannot go back and say, I don't like the minutes that we approved 6 months ago and go back and do cut and paste or erasures. That's frozen, that's in place. We can put the topic again if we choose. We can't go back and play some games of modifying the record. The record is the record, period. It's the law says it's the record. But there can be an array of input on how the minutes are ultimately formulated. And in the meeting, Steve mentioned that there are elements of style. I guess years ago, there could be exhaustive discussions when you got the minutes, and it was like a terribly, terribly sparse. I mean, to the point maybe of approaching worthless. So it's my understanding that once the minutes are approved, they are approved, period, forever. But during the development of it, we don't necessarily have to memorialize every step along the way in the process of having something to approve.
Right. I mean, it seems, I sort of looked over that before the meeting. It seems like we did that correctly.
That's why we have a lawyer here.
Yeah, that's,
Well, I mean, again,
you have to see it.
I don't know when the original I don't even know when the original meeting was, and so I'm kind of on a two-dimensional plane. I think your discussion, Mr. Chairman, is correct. Once minutes are approved, those are the minutes, and you cannot change them. That's a difference, though, between the style in which the minutes are written, and whether you want to call that an amendment to the minutes or a restyling or some, I don't know that that's a material issue as to what you style it. I have suggested to Mr. Potter that, I mean, the old style in the library long ago was motion made, motion seconded, and motion approved, and there was nothing in between. And the minutes are not supposed to be a journal of a debate that occurs. But I do think the Sunshine Law, at least the spirit of the Sunshine Law, is such that a member of the public who wasn't participating in a meeting, but does have access to your minutes, should be able to have a document that at least gives them an idea of what was going on. And I've suggested to Mr. Potter that I think it would be a good idea for there to be a resolution of the style of your minutes across all your committees and the board, and that perhaps the executive committee should get together and discuss it and bring together a proposal for the board to adopt, so that you're consistent across all your committees, and the public is served, and you have minimum amounts of disagreements on style.
And also, I believe our policies require that if we do receive a legal opinion, it's supposed to be distributed among the board, so.
Yeah, and I did write the email, and I don't have all of your emails.
Okay.
So
Teresa does, so we're.
yeah, so Steve, I try to include Teresa and Steve on everything I write in those in that fashion.
So Mr. President, to that end, I mean, I very much agree. I mean, we don't want a situation where we have one discussion item where there's this much, and another discussion item where there's this much, and that it seems arbitrary. So if we could, if staff, and in this case, staff would be me and Teresa, but also Teresa as part of the executive committee, as secretary of the board, if we could ask the executive committee to meet with us and help us come up with parameters, I think it would be very useful.
Any other comments on personnel?
This is Lori Lemunion, and I'm sorry to ask, but you guys are referring to like a YouTube video. Are you talking about like a previously recorded board meeting? Is that what you guys are referring to? I'm just a little unclear what the cryptic like speaking is. I'm just not following along.
Yeah, there was, we had the personnel committee available on YouTube. In fact, I believe I watched it actually quite shortly after the meeting. It was immediately available. And some of the discussion we had involved the development of the minutes. Yeah, Steve.
And Mr. President, this is Steve. And since we, since we started doing the virtual meetings with Zoom, and originally with Teams and then with Zoom, we have been allowing the public to view the live stream because it put us in compliance with the Sunshine Law. So basically, every open meeting that the library board or committees have is live streamed, which allows the public to view, not to participate, but to view as outlined in in statutes 610. But then also, once it gets created, it automatically gets archived. And so you can go to the Mid-Continent YouTube page. You can go to there's a board channel or a governance channel that we're creating, and all of those meetings are there. So if you, I'm sorry if you all didn't know that, but I mean, if you miss a meeting, it's a way that you can catch up and see everything and certainly see context, conversations and how things are working.
Right. So you're referring to a previous meeting, though. That's what you guys, because I'm just not following what the conversation was. So it was a personnel committee meeting that was recorded and is available on YouTube that you guys are referencing.
That is correct, Lori. I'm sorry. I spoke macro and should have spoke micro. Yes. The actual question was around a specific personnel committee meeting that occurred a week ago Wednesday.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, any further discussion, questions? You got it.
Right, so yeah, librarians report. First thing I want to draw to your attention is the supersized bookmark that we have for you. This is our Grow a Reader app, which we've talked about this several times, and this is our new, it's our new version 2.0 app that we have. I sent you an email on this with a link on how to download it, but this is a little bit of a promotion with some screenshots. And the idea is that this, and Katie, I think, talked a little bit about this when she was here last month, encourages people with young children to read 20 minutes a day, and has things like finger plays and rhymes and ways that you can download ebooks and read them to kids straight through the app. So just know about this, tell your friends, neighbors, anyone with little ones. In terms of my report, I really don't have a report per se. What I'm committed to do is I want to make sure that you all are beginning to understand a little bit more about the program that we offer at the library. I mean, you come here, and I'm very thankful for all that you do. I mean, in terms of, you know, the oversight, helping us run a better library system. But sometimes the only time you really hear about the library is if you're either using it or you're hearing about a complaint. And so what I want to do is try to show you proactively some of the things that we're doing and hopefully doing well. Last month, we talked about the summer library program, the summer reading program, and you learned a little bit about that. Tonight, I've asked Amy Fisher and Morgan Perry to be online to talk to us about our Square One small business services and talk to you about how we're helping really micro businesses. So we're not talking about businesses with 50 people, although we do help them too. It's usually the 1 or 2 person entrepreneur businesses that are looking to scale up from their kitchen is kind of our sweet spot. Lots of food-based businesses. So I can see Morgan has joined us. I can see her on the thumbnails. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Morgan to walk you through the presentation about Square One. So Morgan, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Steve. Thank you all so much for giving us a little bit of your time tonight. I am Morgan Carey with Square One Small Business Services right here at Mid-Continent Public Library. Cody, would you turn the slide for me? And we want to give you just a little bit of a background about Square One. So we're going to use terms like economic empowerment team, and we're going to support sustainable community growth. So what we're talking about here is financial literacy. We're talking about entrepreneurship. We're talking about small businesses. We're talking about career services. All of those things that make up the economic health of our communities. Slide, please. So a couple of special emphasis areas for you. We provide educational opportunities for people who do not succeed in traditional learning environments. Now, this can be misleading for some people because if you come in and you've got 5 master's degrees, we'll still let you stay. It's just that we built those opportunities in such a way that we're filling a gap in the ecosystem in the Kansas City area. So that means we're not duplicating efforts that are already happening. The other emphasis area for us is just like Steve said, we work with a lot of food businesses. Food businesses have a really great, in the Venn diagram of life, a really great crossover with some other areas that we know that make people extra vulnerable, like a lack of digital skills or a lack of startup funding. Slide, please. So just a tiny bit more background. We were able to, within 24 hours of quarantine starting, be able to support small businesses online through the use of design thinking. So the mayor said, go home. We went home. One night later, we had our first class because we knew a big small business crisis was headed our way. Slide, please. During that time, not only did we work locally, we also worked nationally, working with other libraries that wanted to support in a user-focused or user service way. Slide, please. So here's where we are today. We've done 96 programs through 2021. That's a little bit down for us. But as you can tell, we're meeting all of our goals as far as attendance. And we've got a focus, and still we're seeing the most of our programming attendees in that discovery idea phase and startup phase. You still, right up there, the people Steve was talking about that are doing just fine and have big companies, they're there too. They're about 4.5% of what we see. Slide, please. So, biggest year in Square One history. Next month we turn 8. 304 one-on-one meetings with entrepreneurs, people looking to start nonprofits and small business owners in 2021. That's a huge year for us. Also, we saw that people are doing a lot of good work in here around what they're coming to us for. So that's going to be research is still our number one thing. And because we're a public library, we like that. Slide, please. Next, I would like to point out that we don't just do informational programming, we do educational programming. Now, here's why that's important. That becomes critical because we're not just giving access to information, we're taking that extra public library step that we're teaching people how to pick the right information and then use that information when they're making decisions in their business. And that is a critical difference. Next slide. We also do a lot of community engagement and outreach, and you'll see that reflected in our customer testimonials. Slide, please. The economic health of our communities are just as important as the physical health of our communities. We want to get people to the point where they're in an environment where they can create more jobs. So this is really where workforce development and small business development meet. And as Steve said, we're focusing on those micro enterprises, those enterprises out there that are not currently being served by other organizations in the metro. Slide, please. So that brings us to our big wow moment tonight. The Urban Libraries Council cohort on entrepreneurial hubs built a business value calculator for libraries across the nation to use. So what this means is we added up all those small business one-on-ones, all those technical skills one-on-ones, all of those things and programs and attendees and services that we offer, and we put them into the calculator, and then it gives us an estimate of the value we are bringing to our community. So if Steve, if you can give me a drum roll. Cody, slide, please. Oh no, it's not there. Well, it's $22 billion.
So hang on.
The slide that was supposed to be there said $22 million.
$22 million is what the slide is what the calculator generates.
So that's the size of the impact that our resources are making in our community. And that's an astounding number. Please contact us if you want access to that value calculator and we can get you that link. Slide, please. We're going to quickly go through a couple of testimonials here. Godfrey Riddle of Civic Safe believes that the greatest resource we have for closing the gap around equity are public libraries. Slide, please. Deanne DeLuca, who is a local writer, says sitting and listening to a podcast or trying to read instructions online, it just doesn't work for me. Depending on how you learn, it's so much more effective when you have a real person there. Slide, please. This is Functional Fitness, another one of our Square One customers that says that we can't afford consultants. So these services from the library are critical for our businesses. And slide, please. This is what our partners have to say about us. Knowing that we can refer folks to Mid-Continent and that they're going to treat them with respect and not talk over them, but work alongside them is really important to us. Thank you so much. Slide, please. For listening today, do you have any questions?
I want to add one more testimonial, secondhand testimonial, and then, Mr. President, I would like you to entertain any questions. So I was at a football game, and I was eavesdropping and listening to this guy talk about his coffee shop and his bean roasting and all of that. And imagine that I'd be eavesdropping. and so he and I kept listening to him, and eventually I said, I just got to come up. I've got to tell you, I've got to start talking to you, trying to recruit him to run Green Hills, things like that. Nice. And I said, do you know about us? And he said, oh yeah, I know Morgan. I know Morgan really well. And he started talking to me about Square One. And he said the amazing thing about Square One and what's been really helpful to him with Square One is like the testimonial, that we don't talk over, that we don't really expect anything in return. We just want you to be successful.
Yeah.
And because of that, he found our folks to be really very helpful. So his name is Bo. I can't remember what Bo's coffee shop is. Do you remember, Morgan?
Yes, he has Cafe Equinox in his
There you go.
family's business. They sell plants. And then he used to have Valmaeus. That's the name of the coffee roasting side.
Right. So just another testimonial, and I have these testimonials all the time when I'm going around town talking to people about what we're doing in terms of small business help and development. So, Mr. President.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments?
I just had a comment.
Please.
I think that the Square One is one of our best investments in the community. And in addition to the services that are offered, I think another cool thing about where they're located right now, which is at Coburn Road, is a co-working space. So if you're in between working out of your garage or kitchen table and you need a place to tide you over between that and developing your own space, the co-working spaces, there's always somebody over there working very hard on contributing to the community. And maybe part of the great resignation are people taking that leap to open their own business as well.
Yeah.
Now is a great time to have that service available.
Any questions, comments?
Michael, I just think this is a great program. It's, man, investing in the community can never go wrong. Sowing into people's lives and helping them generate, even starting a business or generate whatever. And so I really like this, and especially the coffee part. But yeah, just helping people realize, I think a lot of times people just need hope and they need encouragement. And this gives people hope. It's like, I can do this. I've got a plan here. You can help me, and we're doing that. So I really like that part of it.
Yeah, tagging along with, this is Ron, tagging along with what Michael said. It's a generational factor that probably only Michael and I are old enough to recall this, but there was a time when there were small corner stores, not just Sam's or Amazon. They were family farms, not just Conagra, all wonderful enterprises, but people grew up with a sense of enterprise, capitalism, profit and loss. And it might be something as casual as overhearing an older parent or adults converse in this. That's not done anymore. So somebody who has a great idea on a product or service, I think they're coming into the market now without that framework, that cultural attitude and awareness of it's a business. And I think what I like about this is that it deflates into the reality of, more than a half century ago, that it's just not a good idea. There has to be a business plan and a model for it to be effective. I mean, simply witness the host of instances, the statistics, the people have great ideas, wonderful ideas, and they just fall on their face because they don't approach it as a business. Instead, they approach it as an idea or an aspiration, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that too. Just my wheels are turning just as we're talking, but these are mentoring programs where people are actually given, number one, confidence, but they're given a plan to walk this out, because a lot of times they don't know how to do it. They don't have any plan. They can't even set their course, to even establish that. And so just in my wanderings over many, many years, mentors are so key in people's lives, and that's what this is doing. It's mentoring people to have some success and giving people confidence and hope.
Other comments? Questions of our presenter?
Well, I can just wrap this up real quick. Morgan, thank you so much for sharing with us tonight.
Great.
And appreciate all that you're doing and continuing to take people's passion, because sometimes people are super passionate about coffee or cupcakes or something, but they don't have the first idea how to read a P&L statement or something. And Morgan's the type of person that helps them either, like a good librarian, if she doesn't know how to do it, she knows how to find the answer to it. So we appreciate that. Thank you, Morgan.
Morgan, where's your site? Where are you located?
She's at Colburn Road, I think.
Nice.
Yeah, and she's at our Colburn Road Library Center. I'm getting good at recognizing the backgrounds, but to Joycelyn's point, it's not just Colburn Road where people are co-working. So many of those collaboration rooms that we've built, people are doing Zoom meetings in them. We're seeing people meet with advisors from SCORE and things like that. So yeah, we really are doing some real positive things. Ron and I talked about other sort of enrichment ideas like this. I'm going to continue to sort of follow this model where I'll ask somebody who owns a program at the library to come and talk 5 to 8 minutes. And then you can learn a little bit more about something that we're doing besides checking out books. And just learn a little bit more about some of the programmatic things going on. So that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. We have no visitors. Do we have anybody across Teresa?
Yeah, Teresa, any?
No, I had no.
Okay. And we have no closed sessions, so any announcements?
You have your calendar in front of you, so I'm not really, just point out that of course on the 21st will be closed for President's Day, but we've got all of the meetings on your calendar. I'm unaware of any other important.
Staff has informed me that we don't need to have a building committee on the 25th, so I want to break that day for people.
Thank you. I didn't know that.
I checked the cake.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what day was that?
24th, right?
Or whenever.
Oh, 25th of February.
Right.
Got it, sorry.
We will definitely need a personnel committee meeting since the budget starts, usually looking at our personnel budget.
Well, and the new goals model means that we have to meet for that. So.
Appreciate you.
It's just crazy.
Any other announcements? Hearing none, let's go to any trustee comments. Any? Hearing none, we can have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Second. Thank you, everybody.